Good afternoon, Winchendon Public School community. I just wanted to check in and give an update on our elementary school full in-person return to school, which is slated to begin on April 5th. I know that there's been some information communicated to our school communities, most specifically Toy Town and Memorial Elementary families, and you've had the opportunity to decide if you would like to have your students return to full in-person learning 5 days a week. Every day at kind of a traditional classroom, or, and it's very important that families understand, if you're uncomfortable with the situation, you are more than welcome to continue with remote learning in your homes and have your student be a fully remote student. Toward that end, and I am working with DESE right now to clarify, as their guidance is not 100% clear, but my understanding is that if you are working in a remote situation, if you choose remote learning for your student, that there will be the expectation of 5 hours of instructional time a day. So as it pertains specifically to this return to full in-person learning, that is the premise under which this all operates, where across the state of Massachusetts, our guidelines and state regulations are that elementary school students have 5 hours a day of instruction in front of their teachers, academic learning time, so not including lunch, recess, etc. So that is what everything is based around, and that's a traditional school day. Right now, we have met with a task force. We had a task force of teachers and parents, and we met Monday night, received a lot of great feedback. Our principals are working actually this afternoon with their faculties around the scheduling. We have met as a district with transportation. We have met as a district with food services. So a couple of points of clarification I would like to make today. And then I would also like to go through a number of the questions and comments and concerns that both family and teachers have brought up. And I would like to say that both families and teachers really share a lot of the same concerns. So I'm going to take a few minutes to address those amongst a couple of large categories. First, I know we are in the midst of communicating with our transportation company today and over the next couple of days to get in student names and addresses to the transportation company for busing. So please, right now we do not have bus lists or bus stop times. We will get those out as soon as we have them. Like I said, we have just communicated with the transportation company. In terms of food service, if you are returning to the in-person learning on April 5th, please expect that your students will have hot lunches. We'll be back to more of a typical setup in terms of our food services. Breakfast will still be a cold bagged kind of breakfast taken to our classrooms. I'll address the social distancing on that in just a moment. And then lunches will be held in larger spaces where the lunches will be hot lunches with choice that your students are used to making. So that's a great change for our students in our school buildings. I'd like to just take a couple of minutes to go through some of the concerns that were raised by families in a survey we sent out, I believe last week, about questions you might have. And so I've separated those into some kind of large groups. The first major category was transportation, and there were questions around the routes and bus stops. As I just mentioned, we're working on that, and as soon as we have those, we'll convey those to you immediately. The second major question within transportation was around distancing and social distancing. There's been new guidance by DESE very recently. The transportation companies are now, and the buses are now allowed to allow 2 students per seat. Again, that's 2 students per seat. That is essentially a typical bus, a typical situation. Certainly all students are required to wear a mask at all times on the bus and will be required to wear masks throughout the school regardless of their grade. So those are the 2 big pieces that we had questions and concerns coming in on transportation. So 2 students per seat, masks at all times. Food services, there were a number of questions. I'll go through those. Whether or not lunches were free was a question that was brought up, and I'm happy to report that the breakfast and lunch is free for all students from now through the end of the school year and over the course of the summer when we have any summer programming. It's yet to be seen as to what that will look like as we begin next school year, but when that information becomes available, we'll certainly share it. But for now, the lunches and breakfast will continue to be free for all students. There was certainly a question that came up, are you allowed to continue to pack lunches? And the answer to that is absolutely. If you were more comfortable packing a lunch and sending that in with your student, please feel free to do so. The location of lunches, specifically at Memorial, we will do that in the cafeteria, where it is a strict 6 feet of separation while students eat, but we will be allowed to have students remove their masks and eat so long as we adhere to this 6 feet of separation, social distancing. Also, with that, we've had a lot of HVAC updates at Memorial, and one of those things actually allows us to exhaust the air in the cafeteria while students are in there. At the same time, we bring in fresh air. So, it's a great safety measure that we have at our disposal, and we will take advantage of that and have that scheduled each and every day so that fresh air is being brought in while we're also exhausting air while students are in the cafeteria to really remove any stagnant air and reduce the risk of COVID to the best of our ability. What will they eat was another big question. As I mentioned, you will have two or multiple choices a day. The time for lunch, that will depend on the school and the schedule. And then the distancing, like I said, is a 6 feet separation. It's a very strict guidance. I forgot to mention at Toy Town. So as we know, Toy Town is actually housed currently at the Murdoch building. We will most likely be moving our students where they will eat into the gymnasium, where we can spread desks out as much as we want. And additionally, that allows us, if you've been in our gyms, there are very large exhaust fans set up for the gymnasiums in general, and we would run that exhaust fan during the lunch time so that, again, we can remove that stagnant air, keep air moving, and bring it out of the building, again, to remove any chances to the best of our ability and keep that safe, any COVID that might be in the air. I think it's the best thing we can do, and we will make that happen. The other pieces would be around breakfast or snacks, so those will most likely be in classrooms or spread out into the libraries and different areas. But the teachers are working very diligently to come up and be creative. So again, I've mentioned this a few times, if you think of a checkerboard, the classroom is a checkerboard, and again, in the classrooms, we are down to 3 feet of social distancing. The desks will be separated from the edge of a seat to the next edge of a seat by 3 feet. And when you look at that, that looks like a pretty traditional classroom. We'll be able to fill our classrooms to capacity. But when it comes time for mask breaks or snack breaks or breakfast, one of the things we can do in the classroom would be to sort of think of that classroom seating as a checkerboard. And as an example, all the red squares, if you will, every other seat in the opposite rows would be able to remove their masks and eat their breakfast or have their mask break, etc. Do that for an allotted amount of time, and then the students would switch who gets to do that. So it would still maintain that 6 feet of separation, but allow us to do that in a classroom and continue on with our instruction to meet that instructional time. In terms of scheduling, has been another big question. At this point, we're closing in on that, and as I said, the principals are working today with their faculties to pin that down. We will, there is the possibility that your student's teacher could change based on this return to in-person learning, just based on class makeups and those types of things. We have offered, in addition to anybody who is currently remote learning, you're certainly welcome to return to in-person or choose to continue. And we've also extended to our homeschooling families that at this time we are about to return to in-person. And a few families have taken us up on that and will be returning to our schools. Toy Town will continue to be located on the first floor of the Murdoch building, and we are still confident, we've been in there in a hybrid mode, and we're confident that we'll be able to keep the students separated. We'll be able to schedule the lunches and everything, where the elementary students will be separate from both the high school and middle school students. There's a question around COVID. We will still follow those guidelines. If we do have an incidence of COVID in our buildings, whether it's an adult or a student, we will follow the guidelines we've been following throughout the year and do the same types of things where we work with the Board of Health to alert families and so on. So that will continue to be in place. There was a question around cohorts. So really the way this looks is if you are in a particular teacher's class, I'm just making up a name here, but if you were in Miss Smith's class and you were in either cohort A or cohort B, for all intents and purposes, what that looks like, that was actually one big classroom. We just broke it out over 2 cohorts for the Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday, Friday. And when we return to in-person, for all intents and purposes, those 2 cohorts will be combined into one room. So it'll look like very much a traditional room where we could have up to 20 or beyond students. Based on the 3 feet of social distancing within those classrooms will dictate capacity. But at this point, it looks like a relatively traditional classroom. Other concerns that were raised relative to sort of safety, but not specific to not specific to masks, were some things around temperature checks, spread by touch, those types of questions. And when it comes to those types of things, temperature checks is not something that's been recommended in the guidance by the Department of Education for Massachusetts schools. And I've conveyed this before. If any of you have been to the doctor over the course of the summer, one of the things I was asked to do when I went was I had to wait in an air-conditioned room because the skin's temperature is raised just by the ambient temperature. So the temperature checks were not 100% accurate. So we've not relied on that in Massachusetts schools. The spread in our schools, to be really honest, as the COVID lead through this entire endeavor, we've really not had spread within the schools amongst the students, and it's not been a concern. And I would say that it's, what we've seen here in the district is reflective of what the Commissioner of Education is reporting. Spread by touch has been, the science has come out and said that there's much less concern around spreading the virus in terms of from one surface to another. We will continue to clean our schools. We will do the evening clean where we have sprays and all sorts of things that we do the horizontal surfaces. We've been doing that all along, and we will continue to do that to keep the safest possible environment for all of our students and faculty on an ongoing basis. And I know that one other question that just came to mind I didn't have written down. There's a lot of questions about water fountains and water bottles and so on. So within our schools, both Memorial and at the high school, or I should say Murdoch, where Toy Town is housed on the first floor, we have bubblers in those locations where the ability to bend over and drink from a water fountain is turned off. However, you are able to fill water bottles. We had those bubblers installed a couple of years ago where they have a water bottle filler. And so those are still able to be used, and that's a way that our students will be able to rehydrate throughout the day and fill their water bottles. So those things will continue to be available to our students at both of those buildings in an ongoing fashion. Those were the major questions of concern that were raised through the parent survey. And I'm happy to answer any additional concerns or questions as we move forward. Please feel free to respond or send me emails directly at tking@winchendonk12.org. At this time, that's the best update I have. We are well on our way to reopening the schools on April 5th, and I look forward to meeting and greeting many of you on that day as you drop off your children to return to somewhat of a normal learning process here in the Winchendon Public Schools. Thank you, and have a great day.